Welcome to the show, Ava. We're so excited to have you here. You are such a beautiful breath of fresh air, literally a bright, shining light. And we are just so excited to be able to showcase your wisdom here on the Elevated Life. So thank you so much for showing up and shining today.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm glad that we could make this happen. And I feel like it's going to be, I love when there's two hosts because I feel like we can have such a dynamic conversation and just gets to be so fun. So many different views get to come in.
I love that. Yeah, it's they describe us as a little bit of woo woo and a little bit of fuck you. So it's a beautiful perspective from the practical, the logical, and just the intuitive, magical mind too. And that's what
Yeah.
I love about the work that you're doing. And as yoga teachers ourselves, it's so important, I think, for us to come together and share that wisdom and not just keep it segregated or gatekeep. And I think having people on the podcast like yourself, I think just shows the community on how we can all collaborate and help to build each other up. And it's not about competition anymore. It's really about knowing that we all have this magical, I call it sparkle magic, but not everyone subscribes to that. But we all have this sparkle magic within us that when we can tap into that, share that, be vulnerable and open up, I feel like we can just grow so much faster together. I feel like you probably align to that.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared like the aspect around not gatekeeping because something that I've been really passionate about in my work is even bringing things outside of the yoga studio, right? Like all of the different subsets of individuals, industries, demographics that at one point or maybe still think of yoga, breathwork, meditation as quote unquote woo woo. How do we actually bring them these practices that are absolutely life changing and like work with the brain and the body on like a cellular level to be able to access greater states of living, greater health, greater happiness. And so I love that you brought that into this space because it's something that's really important to me and important to my company because we can get this work out to so many more people when it's not just kept in one silo of the yoga studio.
And you know what? I think it's so important now because I was just looking at stats and it's going to be a sad stat, but 2022, we had the highest suicide rate ever recorded, period. And so we are definitely in a time where it feels like people are desperate to begin to get to know themselves. I think that social media and a lot of things have sold us different kinds of dreams. We're always watching the influencers. We're seeing how people live these kind of perfect lives. And a lot of times when we try to compare that to our own lives, maybe we end up falling short, not realizing the other person has dark sides or shadow sides, and not every day looks like a highlight reel. And had it not been for Stan Grof coming over here in the 1960s after doing 4,500 LSD observations and all that kind of stuff, and bringing holotropic breath work and all these different kind of modalities as people experimented with drugs and altered states. Had we not had the East basically brought back over here, I feel like we would be at a point now where we'd almost not have the tools to do anything. Because if all the medications and all the psychotherapy and all that stuff worked, we wouldn't be in the same situation that we're in. So I think a lot of us are trying to pull back to, well, what are the modalities that people use for thousands of years? Like, where are all these old, we're rediscovering old things. All this stuff is old stuff. I've been doing hypnosis work for over 20 years now. People are like, oh my gosh, this is so brand new. And I'm like, it's not. None of this shit is new at all. Like, people have been doing this for so long. It just hasn't always been mainstream. And I love now that like yoga is finally starting to come out. People know what yoga is. I remember when we first started doing it, I was telling a guy like, hey, I do yoga. People are like, what?
Yeah.
You like stretch, like gymnastics? I'm like, no, no, no. It's something totally different. So I want to know, what got you into breath work? Like, how did you arrive into doing this, and not only doing it, but also teaching it? Big thing
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. I fell into yoga first and foremost. I used to work in a really high stress startup environment where, you're supposed to be in before the boss, out after the boss leaves, and just huge client load and such a normalized state of burnout and chronic stress to the point where I actually didn't know that I was stressed out. I was like, this is normal. Life is supposed to be miserable Monday through Friday. And then you soothe yourself over the weekend with partying and drugs and are so disconnected from your body, so disconnected from your own inner truth. Like if someone said inner truth to me at that point in my life, I'd be like, what are you talking about? And so I had a girlfriend that actually dragged me to a yoga class. And when I experienced actually like arriving back in my body for the first time probably in my entire life, because I had a pretty traumatic upbringing. I had this come to Jesus moment, that I like to call it, of like, wow, I really want to make people feel as good as I feel right now in my body. And so I almost immediately enrolled in a yoga teacher training, as many do when they get that pull. And it was our very first session I think on the first night or the second night, where we did breath work, and it was Wim Hof, actually. I had later gone on to explore holotropic and two-part breath later, actually, in that training, from different practitioners coming in. And I remember calling my girlfriend and being like, I don't even know what planet I'm on right now. And I used to live in Ocean Beach, San Diego. She's like, go stick your toes in the sand, like ground yourself. But I can tell that you found something here. And I am the type of personality that goes balls to the wall in information that I am passionate about. And so breath work, and then meditation as well, became that thing for me, where I just became obsessed with figuring out, why do I feel this way while I'm breathing? How am I able to access these states that had once only been available via LSD or via mushrooms? And how can I take this very esoteric, in a way, practice, or it's been packaged as being very esoteric spiritual practice, that I'm seeing a lot of people utilizing within the yoga studio with very airy type of language that doesn't necessarily connect with everybody, and bring it back down to earth so I can understand it, but then I can also translate it to other people. And so I went through a variety of different breathwork trainings, meditation teacher trainings, continued down the path of yoga, taught for a while in LA and in San Diego, and started really being referenced by many different studios and brands as the person to go to for breath work. And I was just teaching. In my classes. I was bringing it into more traditional movement spaces like sculpt yoga and HIIT workouts, and
Infiltrating.
yeah. I was like, I know that you want to move your body, but we're also going to breathe together. And you don't know what we're doing. Don't worry about it. Yes, you look a little weird, but you're going to feel incredible afterwards. And so I was getting that response of like, that was weird at first, but I feel so good. And like, I don't feel antsy after my workout. I don't feel all hyped up. And so again, I was like, well, let's figure out why that is. And so I got really into the nervous system, neuroscience, somatics, and over time, between all of the different trainings I did, between my background in digital marketing and sales and building a business, I created the Academy of Breath, which now I teach teachers how to do this as well, which really was to fill the void that I found in every teacher training that I had ever been through, and bridge the gap between science and spirituality, while also providing these people that were investing a lot of money in their education with, now this is how you implement it and build a business out of it. So it's been so much fun. And even though I was able to synthesize it in 3 minutes, it's also been such a massive journey getting to the point that I'm at right now. But I love this work so much. And it's so cool when people realize that doing breath work is so much bigger than like just holotropic or just two-part breath. Like, we can bring these practices into our everyday life. And I really believe that they make us superhuman.
So what do you feel was the gap that you bridged with the Academy of Breath? Where do you feel like all of the trainings that you had failed or didn't provide that full knowledge?
So I found that many trainings were either too spiritual based, which is beautiful, I love that, or too science based. And so it wasn't providing an all-encompassing view and perspective on these practices. And for me, because I started in the yoga world, I started at a little mom and pop studio that really honored the tradition of yoga. It wasn't your core power. I love core power as well too, but it wasn't just like the Western yoga. It was Eastern yoga. And so for me, going into certain trainings and it just being like science, I was like, but wait, there's magic here. There's a reason we do these things. It's deeper than just neuroplasticity. It's also energy work. It's also connecting to the divine. Like there's heart in these practices. And I just felt like many of the trainings were lacking there when they were too science heavy. But then on the other side, there were certain trainings I went to where it was like, we need something rooted to be able to reach the modern world. Like not everyone is going to connect with, like, feel into your energy body. So how do we break that down for them in a way that they understand and can actually grasp onto something? And so I found that it was like the pendulum would swing too far one way or another. And essentially every single training that I've ever done has never had actual in-depth business mentorship. And so that was the piece where I was like, this is easy for me. I love doing this. And the last thing I want is for my teachers to be like, I know how to teach, but I don't know how to get a client.
Yeah, it's such a shame to find people who are passionate, people who care about other people, and then you realize they can't make a dollar doing it until they end up back at their old job or back doing something they pull so hard away from their passion because it doesn't pay the bills. And it's so great. I feel like so many people who are especially spiritual entrepreneurs or anybody who wants to help somebody, it's so important for them to get massive business training, for them to really start to understand marketing, for them to start to understand the self-worth thing that comes in. Because a lot of people have the whole idea, and I'd love for you to talk about this because it comes up all the time, and that is when you're doing a spiritual thing, when you're doing a spiritual based practice like breathwork, like how do you reconcile the how can I charge for this? How can I request from the other person, okay, pull out your wallet for a minute and give me a couple dollars? You know, how do you internalize that? How do you get over that block?
Yeah, I love this question. And it comes up all the time with my teachers. It's remembering that the work that we're doing is actually priceless. And if you can zoom out and think about the ripple effect that your work has in a person's life, the results, are just unending and infinite. If you think about even going back to me as a testimony, right? Like if the yoga studio didn't charge for me to go take classes, I probably wouldn't have shown up to those classes, and I probably wouldn't have taken the work as seriously. I wouldn't have been as devoted. But not only that, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect with my body in that way. And that set me down this entire path of now changing and impacting literally more lives that I could even comprehend because of the ripple effect of the Academy of Breath. And so when I think about the ripple effect beyond just like, I'm teaching you how to breathe, or I'm teaching you how to stretch your body, or you're going to get this chiropractic adjustment, or you're doing this Reiki work. When I think about what happens beyond that and how that impacts how they feel about themselves, the quality of their thoughts, the quality of their action that they take from that point forward, you really can see that like the work is so important, and it's so much more profound than just like transacting A for B, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You know, the other thing I'd love to get your opinion on, especially as a guy, because telling guys about this kind of stuff, luckily Wim Hof came along, because had Wim Hof not come along, I feel like I'd still get the deer in the headlights from most males. You know, they just kind of like, what? You know, it's what would you describe? How would you say a person coming in, I've never done breathwork before. I've never gone to a yoga class. I've never done any kind of that weird stuff. And so I'm coming in the first time. What type of benefit can I expect? Or what could I expect if I continued doing it for, let's say, 6 months to a year? Like, how would my life be different? How would I face life in a different way?
I love this. All right. So I'm going to speak to the men out there then. So one of the biggest things that happens when you start practicing breath work is that you begin to create a deeper level of focus and awareness within your life that allows for your attention and your intention in everything that you do to be amplified. So whether that is bringing a business project to life, or a creative project, or a passion project that you have in your life, being able to channel full presence and full focus into each of your projects is going to allow for it to turn out even better than it ever could have had you been half in or half out, or had you been pulled in one direction because you're trying to balance bringing in or being 100% father, 100% partner, 100% employee or CEO. And so having the ability to channel focus into everything that you do allows for everything that you do to be that much better. That is one of the biggest things that happens instantaneously, because the moment that you start practicing breath work, you begin to train your mind to stay more present, to stay more focused. And in the times when you're not present and you're not focused, you're more aware of and can draw yourself back to the present moment faster. And that's just how the brain works whenever we are doing any types of practices that bring our awareness into the moment again and again and again. And so focus and productivity is one of the fastest benefits that you begin to see from breath work. But not only that, when you think about how the breath interacts with your nervous system, and it is the most powerful tool that interacts with your nervous system, your ability to stay out of a stress response and to be able to handle life's daily demands and challenges is taken to an entirely different caliber. Because anytime that you start to feel stress and understand how stress feels in your body, you have a practice that you can pull out of your back pocket and within 5 minutes or less can bring yourself back into a calm, regulated state so that you have the ability to be the man that you want to be the woman that you want to be. And so the power of being able to control your nervous system, like I said, truly makes you superhuman, because it takes you out of your habitual patterns of maybe anger or high emotions or self-sabotage, and gives you the opportunity to pause and, from a regulated state, ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to act? How do I want to feel? And how do I want to think? And I think that what man or woman, however you identify, is one of the greatest gifts of breath work, because that's how we initiate change.
And can you describe a simple practice that someone could start with to start regulating their nervous system? If they've never been introduced to breath work, where would be the first practice you would start with?
Yeah, totally. So there's two different ways that we can take it. For the person who needs to regulate their system in the moment, like the SOS emergency button, equal ratio breathing is one of my favorite practices. If you've ever done breath work before or familiar, you might know it as box breath. Navy SEALs actually use it to, again, move us out of that stress response, to open your perspective, because stress response and a dysregulated nervous system is really like tunnel vision on survival, right? And so with equal ratio breathing or box breath, it's an inhale for 5 through the nose, hold at the top for 5, exhale through the nose for 5, hold at the bottom for 5. Studies have shown 5 minutes of that practice will activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxation response or rest and digest. So really also good for your entire physical system as well too. So that would be my suggestion on like I need to regulate my nervous system in the moment. But what is really, really cool about breath work and more activating practices is, let's say you're working with somebody, or you yourself are really desiring to expand your capacity to hold more stimulation in your life. Stimulation could come in the form of really exciting things and opportunities. It could come in the form of more money, more clients coming in. It can come in the form of a more full schedule. Can also come in the form of like, I have a lot of stress in my life and I don't want to crumble every time that I have a lot going on. You know, my boyfriend, he is the CMO and co-founder of a tech startup, and they're going through so many different projects at once. He has to balance so many different things. And when you have so much going on, you only have so much that you can tolerate before you're like, I literally want to burn everything to the ground right now and like crawl into the fetal position. And so in order to not reach that, we can also use breath work and more activating practices to expand our tolerance for stimulation, good stimulation and bad stimulation. And so one of my favorite practices that Wim Hof is actually derived from is called Bastrika, or bellows breath. And it's a forceful inhale through the nose, forceful exhale. And so you're still breathing into the belly, ribs, and chest and using the entire capacity of your lungs, but you're taking really deep and fast breaths in and out for about 30 to 40 breaths each. And in doing so, what's actually happening in your system is that you're activating that stress response. You're activating your sympathetic arousal. And the difference between doing it on your own, activating it on your own versus it getting activated because you got a shitty email, is that you learn how to become the pilot of stress in your body so that you become more aware of when you start to feel it. And then you can come back to tools like that first breath practice, box breath, to help you regulate so that you don't burn out, you don't fall into chronic stress, or you don't get overwhelmed by living a highly stimulated life. And so I like looking at both sides of the spectrum, because it's not just let me use this in the moment when I need it most, but it's how do I use this every day to actually make me more equipped or help me be more equipped for all of the big things that I want to do in my life.
Well, to your point, we all know that knowing breath work doesn't save us from burnout. It's actually practicing. Have you found along your journey that you've fallen off the practice before? And if so, what did you do to get back into it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that you said that. Yeah, knowing it is not the same as practicing it. So, to be honest, even in the times where I have fallen out of a daily practice, I still bring breath into my everyday experience, because it's just something that at this point is like programmed into me. I know how powerful it is to take 3 deep breaths. I know that when we end this conversation and I turn off the freaking floodlight that I have on my face, I'm going to close my eyes and take a few breaths in, and that even in itself is going to help me to ground my energy and kind of release any of the excitement that we have from this conversation. So even when I'm not doing a 15, 20, 30-minute practice every single day, I'm still bringing breath into my day. And that's what I really love about just breath work overall, is that it doesn't have to be a really long, drawn out practice. And for those that are listening that are like, I have kind of gone on this roller coaster of being in it and being out of it, my invitation to make it easier and more approachable is to invite in moments throughout your day where you connect with your breath, and let that be enough in the times where you don't necessarily have time for 20, 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or you have a lot of resistance coming up. And so that's always been my approach, that even in the times where I'm not sitting down to do a longer practice, I'm still being really mindful that I'm aware of my breath throughout my day. When I'm on calls with people, I have my hand on my belly and I'm feeling myself breathing. And that's just a really simple way for us to never really fully fall out of the practice. But if you're not even doing that, I think that the question I always will come back to, that one of my mentors shared with me, I think on day one of us working together years ago, was anytime that resistance comes up, ask yourself, why are you resisting your own rising? And that's like such a little boom. Okay, there we go. Because the truth is, these are tools for growth and expansion. And yes, resistance is going to come up anytime that we're doing something new, but I'm not here to resist my evolution. I'm not here to keep myself in the same place. That's not what my soul called in for this lifetime. And it sure as hell is not going to be okay in my world if I see somebody doing it. I'm like, nope, I'm calling you higher. We're doing this together. It can be so much more simple, and don't resist like who you're meant to become.
Ooh,
That's why we have her on the elevated life, because that's the direction. We always say up and on. When bullshit's going on, we're like up and on. If we're not going up and on, like it ain't worth fucking with.
Yeah, we so we talked a little bit about what to do in the moment. We've talked a little bit about how to start a bit of a practice. What I want to ask you about, something that I'm personally always very interested in my work, it's like something that happens, that comes up and you're not expecting it, but when it does, you're like, hell to the yeah. Can you talk a little bit about altered states? Because what ends up happening when you do the longer breath work, especially with the longer session, I mean, you get people high as a satellite. I mean, you can have people just doing things with their bodies and experiencing emotions and potentially trauma and releasing things. Can you talk about what that looks like? And then also, as a facilitator, how do you deal with what's coming up for them? Because it's a lot of times easy, especially as we care about a person. And if you're with a person, when you're that connected, when you see the person crying on the floor and they're going through something, it's very difficult to just close yourself off. I mean, that's hard to do. How do you deal with that? How do you kind of shake that off of yourself to kind of, okay, that's their problem instead of mine? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, you really can't close yourself to it, because you signed up to be a facilitator and hold space for people that knowingly well, I mean, I don't know every teacher training, so maybe in some teacher trainings they don't talk about space holding, they don't talk about taking a trauma informed approach, they don't tell you what to do if someone starts crying or screaming, or maybe they don't even tell you that people could do that. And so for me, integrity in this space is so big, because we are working with the nervous system. We are working with the complex bio individual human brain and human heart and lifetime of every single individual that comes into our spaces. And so yes, breathwork is so beautiful, and you're absolutely right. When we're in it for longer periods of time, you're moving a lot of energy. I mean, pranayama itself is all about moving and working with our energy. Translated from Sanskrit, it's the extension of life force. And our life force, prana, is energy. It's the building blocks, you know, in a more modern term, it's like the atom, right? The atom, the atom. And so when we're working with energy, whatever is underneath the surface of our awareness is likely going to come up. And there's a couple different aspects to this as it relates to altered states, but also processing whatever does come up. When we are moving past that first layer of consciousness, and I'll translate it into science. So right now we're in like a beta brainwave state. We're focused externally, and everyone that's listening, you're listening to my words, you're in a beta state right now with outward focus. When you start practicing different breathwork techniques, and the longer that you go into it, you start to move into deeper brainwave states. First alpha, then theta, sometimes delta, and sometimes gamma, depending again on the breathwork practice. And all of those different states are associated with different layers of consciousness, from again outward to deeply intuitive, inward, eventually to, and more from the yogic tradition, to like oneness and divine consciousness. And so as we sit in these practices for longer and move through these different layers of our being, there's going to be invitations for different things to come up. And those things might be memories, they might be visions, it might be emotions and feelings of bliss or ecstasy or pain or anger. And what I think is really beautiful about breathwork is that it's like, it literally is like, it can be this purge where whatever is meant to come up is meant to come up. And so I always like to say meant to come up, because I think it reminds us that if it wasn't meant to come up, if we weren't equipped to handle it or to deal with it or sit with it or let it go, then it wouldn't be brought to our awareness. Like our nervous system and our brains are brilliant. Like they are so intelligent. They are not going to show us trauma that we're not ready to process. That's why at certain points in your life, you might have a flashback or a memory come up that you're like, I didn't even know that repressed memory was there. And it's because your nervous system is saying, oh, ding, 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 this is the time. And so oftentimes in breath work, that's what happens. Not all the time. And typically when you're doing practices under 30 minutes or less, you're not going to have like a deep, intense emotional release. I think you can start to get to that place. And if your brain or your body is ready to get there, then it absolutely can happen. But when you are practicing for these longer periods of time and that does come up, I allow it. I welcome it. I remember that in the same way that if we were popping a pimple, like it's ready to come up and it's coming out to the surface because it's ready to be purged from our system. And so from the practitioner standpoint, I think that it's just knowing like you are safe in your body. Again, you are the one creating this experience inside of your body through your breath. So if at any point it's too much, you can always just stop and just return back to your natural breath. And as a facilitator, it's so important that we say that at the very beginning of our sessions and let people know that there are safe anchors for them within themselves, whether it's touch or breath or shaking or toning. And also as a facilitator at the beginning, asking for permission really of like how you can best be a support and anchor for those people. And so inside of our training, we talk about this and taking a trauma informed approach. I also just recently wrapped up an entire 2-week boot camp on space holding, but it's delicate work. It's intimate work. It's work that requires us to take greater responsibility first and foremost for how we hold space for ourselves, because if we're able to hold space for ourselves in those times, then we'll have no problem holding space for other people, and knowing also how to disconnect the energy between that person and us so that we're not carrying it with us later on.
I always say your past is meant to be relieved and not relived. And I think that you absolutely brought up the most important point, that when something is ready to be released, become the witness of what is coming up so that you can see it and release it and not go into that cycle and into that story and that drama again. And so many people fear that when it comes up, I always hear that phrase, but I thought I was over this. Well, you are, and that's why it's trying to leave your body now. Like it's out of your mind. Now we got to get out of your body.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, when you're with a person and you know, it's going to be one of those intense sessions where you're like, this isn't just somebody, we're just going to breathe for a couple minutes. Things are going to happen. Do you find yourself going into trance with them? Like, do you find yourself entering altered states with, I know for me personally, and it's not something I'm trying to do necessarily, it spontaneously happens. It's almost like we're walking a little bit of the journey together. Like, I may not be, I'm with them, not experiencing things that are going on in like my life or things in the past, but I'm definitely with them. Do you find yourself doing the same thing?
So, I have always found myself to really be an anchor for people. And I find that while in my work I can like go there with people, my greatest skill is at actually having both of my feet like on the ground and holding the energy for them so that they can go into that experience but know that like the safety is here. In the same way that like if you had a friend that was doing mushrooms with you and doing like a hero's dose of mushrooms, but you were like their babysitter, it's like that's kind of how I feel as a facilitator. But what I will also say is that as a breathwork practitioner, my jam actually isn't in doing a lot of the trauma work. I'm trauma informed and I know how to hold space if it comes up, but I don't market myself or create experiences specifically to go deep into trauma, mainly because that's just not what I like love doing. Like I will do it, but I find myself to be more passionate about the elevation piece. And I know that there's an aspect of processing all of that in order to elevate. We have to be able to look through all of those things, but I've actually really over the past several years given myself permission to not be that breathwork teacher. And I think that it's really cool because sometimes I have a lot of times I have people inside of my training that are like, I don't know if I want to hold space for people like in that way. Like I can do it and I feel like I'm confident in being able to do it if it comes up, but I just don't know if I necessarily want that to be like my style of work. And even my mom, she's getting her PhD right now in therapy, and she's been talking to me because she's been going through all the different courses, and she's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to like do this kind of therapy or do that type of therapy. Like, I think this is what I want to do. And so I think that it's cool that we have different playing fields or different types of work and different types of ways that we can use breath work. And there's certain people that like just go there with you and are able to get into the muck. And then there's certain people that can offer a different experience using the same practices. And I think that that's what's really special.
Yeah, send them my way because the more trauma, the better. I fucking love it. I'm like, let's get it all out, baby girl. Like I think I've been for the last 5 or 6 years been hosting every full moon and doing release rituals. And I was doing the new moon, full moon every 2 weeks. And I just ditched the new moon and I was like, let's go full moon release, baby. All day. Like we can manifest. And what I've learned, and I think it's so important, like what you talk about, the two different pieces go hand in hand. You have to have both because I started realizing everyone can say what the fuck they want on their little piece of paper of manifestation, but not everyone knows how to release the blocks and the limiting beliefs that stop them from opening up to elevate and receive that next level. So for me, I found like my best work is identifying where the blocks and the bullshit are from stopping them from going to those higher places where you're taking them.
Yeah. I mean, it literally, you can't if you don't know what the blocks are, if you don't know what your blind spots are, if you don't have the ability, one of my mentors always says, like, you can't do brain surgery on yourself. And so if that's where you're at, like, we need this work. Like, I know that the growth that I have today, because, you know, like I said, I had a traumatic childhood. Like, there's a lot of shit that I had to work through in order to be where I am today. And like, so much of my growth has come from being able to sit with my shit and be radically honest and know how to process it and know how to hold myself through it. And so by no means do I feel like we need to bypass that. I think that it is so freaking important. And we also, after doing that work, get to play. And that's where it gets to get even groovier.
Totally. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is thinking about someone who's coming in and wanting to be a facilitator, someone who wants to help other people work through things, even if they're going in an upward trajectory? How important it is for the facilitator to take care of their own health, their own body, their own physical, their own mental? Because this is what I find all the time. You go meet the person and you're like, you're worn out. I can see it on your face. You're not taking that's the weirdest thing to me. When I if I ever go into a doctor's office and the doctor's like way overweight, and you can, I'm like, how are you gonna, what kind of advice are you gonna give me? Like, you can't be the person. Can you talk about like how important it is to keep the physical vessel,
Practice what you preach.
yeah, cleansed and all that kind of, you know, going to bed early, all the right things. Like, how important is that?
Oh my gosh, you're like going to the doctor's office. He's got like smoke lines, he's hacking up a lung. It's like, just take this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most important. But also, like, here's the thing. If you're not doing it, people are going to smell your bullshit from a mile away, right? And so not only is it so important, like I said, like, if you want to take people deep, you better be able to go deep yourself. Like, you're not going to know how to hold somebody. Britt, like, if you were like, well, let's do this full moon ritual, but I've never actually taken people this far before. And if someone had an emotional release, you'd be like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to hold this person. So you had to walk your walk. You had to practice what you preached in order for the people in your world to get the incredible results that they get. And so it's, I mean, embodying and practicing what you preach is like the foundation of personal success, but also the success that you have with your clients. I mean, that is integrity at its core. And I just find that these conversations actually are happening more and more, which makes me really, really happy, because I think a lot of people, especially like when the pandemic started, were super excited to get online because they saw so many people making money and it looked so easy. And oh my gosh, all I have to do is become a coach, or all I have to do is start teaching meditation, or all I have to do is XYZ. And we're either just regurgitating information that they saw online, or maybe took a course and did something, but didn't actually start applying it. And then the coaching industry started getting a bad rep and the healing industry started getting a bad rep because there are all these people that weren't actually doing it for themselves. And, you know, this is different than falling in and out of practice from time to time. Like, we're not perfect. We're human. There's going to be moments where you have the cutest little kitty cat walking behind you, by the way. I'm like, oh my gosh. We're not perfect though. And so it's okay if you're not absolutely perfect in every single practice, every single day, waking up at 6 a.m. and meditating with the moon, whatever. Like, we're not asking that of you. What we're asking is that you treat yourself as your most important client, and that you, like you said, practice what you preach. You walk your walk, like you become a walking testimonial. And I don't know why that is, like, there's so much resistance around that, because if you are doing your work, then you're going to see in real time how great it is, and you're going to feel incredible, and you're going to feel more confident, and imposter syndrome is going to go away, and people are going to feel your energy the moment that they interact with you. Like, it's just the benefits of it are not just like from the integrity thing, but it's also like selfish. Like, why would you not want to feel good? Why would you not want to be like using these practices that are meant to support you in creating an elevated life every day? So yeah, I could go on for hours about that. But one of the things that I tell my students inside of AOB is like, this is about you first. you're going to do this first every single day. Like your homework isn't related to teaching people until we get halfway through the course. Like your homework is you doing this work. I want you to have a felt sense of this work. I want you to develop your own vocabulary around this. I want you to know what it's like to experience this practice, or this practice, so that you can hold other people through it. And you can also see in real time the effects of what you're going to be teaching other people.
So in your perfect practice, what does your routine look like? Are you starting your day with breath work? Do you have an alarm that goes off 7 times a day? Is it like not like moon's up, gotta go? Like what does your perfect practice look like?
So I lately have been waking up, starting with like morning mantras and affirmations. I just listen to audios. I don't even like repeat them myself. I just like listening to nice things in the morning, closing my eyes and breathing, different breathwork practices every single day, depending on what I need. And then going to the gym, moving my body. For me, it's really important, because I've dealt with anxiety and high stress in the past, that my practices don't only happen up here, but they happen in the body as well. So in a perfect world, it's breath work, meditation, visualization, putting in and plugging into something positive, whether it's a meditation, like a audio meditation or a training or a podcast, moving my body, and eating well. That's it. It's so simple, right?
It's crazy how basic it could be, and how we always try to make it hard. You know, it's always like you always people like, oh man, this show is so expensive to be healthy. I'm like, have you been to a produce section lately? Produce pretty cheap. You know, I mean, lettuce can only cost something. Cucumber is only so expensive. And then it's wild how I know people are so sometimes dismissive of breath work. People can be dismissive of yoga practices and guided meditations or visualizations. And it's wild because this is the shit that actually works. I mean, it's the stuff like when you start doing any kind of visualization, people don't realize how often they're projecting themselves into the future. I mean, we just don't have we lack the awareness, like you're talking about. Breath work gives you awareness. Like that to me is such the main benefit, because most people aren't aware while they have sex with their partner. They're not aware at dinner table. They're just stuck in their phone. They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about what they're going to do on their to-do list. They're thinking about what happened at work. And meanwhile, you've disconnected yourself from any possible miracle that can happen, because miracles are only occurring in the present moment. And the second that you're in your thought, now you can't see it. And so it's like having that awareness brings so much extra to life. And it's so sad that people skip out on it because it's simple. Breathwork practices, for the most part, are very simple. You can explain it typically in only a few steps. And then once you get someone doing it, you see their face. A lot of times when I first have a client, I like to do a couple of breathwork things before we really get going, for the most part, because since I do hypnosis, people are always kind of like, what the hell are we about to do? Are you going to turn me into a duck? What is, what's going on? So I always have
a little foreplay,
little bit of foreplay. So it's just a little bit of breathwork. And sometimes I realize after we've done a couple of them, I'm like, we actually don't need to do any more stuff. Like the benefit that you were looking for to get here, we have already accomplished in the first 5 to 10 minutes, and we're just breathing together. You see their eyes, because I like to have them close their eyes so they're not concentrating on how I look, or how they look on Zoom or whatever. And the second they come back and open their eyes, you can see it. It's like the whites in their eyes are brighter, and it's almost like, holy shit, I've been so stressed. They look at you like you did a miracle pill. They always just like, dude, what did you just do to me? I'm like, you just breathed. We were breathing together. That was the only kind of complication that really happened. And I find it so amazing that people are always trying to grab that new, quick, easy gimmick, life hack, that weird thing. It's like, it's always just coming back to yourself. This body that we have, this spirit that we have, is already well equipped. If we would just be able to figure out how to use some of its mechanisms, the ways that we can feel inside, how much pleasure you can experience, how much happiness and joy, how much beauty you can notice, is all decided about how you're breathing. Because the second that you pull away from that breath, you can't see it. All you're doing is your imagination, and anything you create in your imagination is not real. And so it's amazing to watch how visualization can really impact somebody's life. I'm curious, how do you like using visualization, and how do you use it in tandem with breath work? How do you use those two things together? For me, I found a really beautiful marriage, but I'm curious, like, how do you like to use that?
Yeah, I just love everything that you said. I'm like, we should just end the podcast there, because that was perfect. And I agree with you. So many people are looking for that secret hack, but like we're already programmed with everything that we need to create what we desire. And I love bringing visualization into breath work and pairing the two together. And in fact, you know, if we look at visualization just as like a meditation practice, for me and for many others, just meditating or visualizing was really, really challenging before I started learning about breath work and bringing breath work into my practice. Like the only reason I'm able to meditate and sit still and like be settled in my body and even like see anything behind my eyes or feel anything is because of breath work. And you know, there's two different ways that I like to use it. And I think it's helpful to come back to the science. You know, we're running around, our mind is going a million miles a minute. Of course, there's the benefit of breath work bringing us into the present moment. But when our brains are in a chronic stress state, we actually shut down the frontal lobe of the brain. The amygdala goes full online as the only driving ship of our experience, because we've been in such a state of survival that we don't need our cognitive brain that takes longer to process information online when we're trying to quickly get out of the threat. And the reality is like, even if you don't feel like you're in a threatened environment, blue light is a threat. That shitty email is a threat. That random bill in the mail is a threat. And so most people have all of these micro triggers of stress and threats happening every single day that eventually their processing and frontal lobe of the brain ends up shutting down. And so knowing that we don't have access to, for a lot of people, rational thinking, envisioning, creativity, like you said, 5 minutes of breath in the beginning actually just turns the frontal lobe back online, gives us access to one of the most important parts of our brain as it relates to cognition and growth and like really like creating a new mind. And so what I'll do is, first and foremost, as it relates to pairing the two together, is just bring in calming practices to make sure that the frontal lobe of the brain is online, so that if I do ask somebody to visualize something or feel into something, they have access to the part of themselves that can actually do that. Outside of that, and I'm interested in what you actually have to say about this, I actually look at visualization as more of an embodiment practice and more of a sensational experience, where we're not necessarily envisioning something in our mind's eye from the perspective of like seeing a movie playing in our head. Like if that comes up, amazing, great. But what I find to be even more powerful for people is when they're able to interject into the feelings and emotions and sensations in their body and input certain feelings, emotions, and sensations that relate to the thing that they're dreaming of, the thing that they're envisioning, the thing that they desire to create. So really like using visualization, even though it's visualization, more of like embodiment and feeling and sensation to help them access this greater elevated state.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the emotion is what magnetizes what you're visualizing in the mind to the body.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So I had a client not too long ago who could not pee in public. He can't pee. He goes in a regular bathroom. You can't, it's never going to happen. I mean, in this, he could have had a gallon of water and he could not be going home for 10 hours. It does not matter. He cannot get it to drip out. Right. And so he comes to me, he's like, hey, I have a weird request for you, but I can't pee in public. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine. You know, let's get down into it. And so what's interesting is all I had him do, did visualization exercises. So I had him picture in that he's in the bathroom and that he's got to go to the bathroom and that no one else is in there with him, but he can hear everybody in the background, but he's just totally relaxed. I'm like, and you feel relaxed. And he's like, and because you feel relaxed, it's not hard to go to the bathroom. I was like, but now, okay, you bring another person in. We've got one person now here's in the bathroom with you. But they're down at the end, but you can hear them. They're rustling around. They're doing whatever they're doing, but you feel relaxed. And it's that feeling that I'm constantly coming back to. It's that feeling of relaxation, feeling of I'm in control, feeling of like, there's no reason for me to worry. Who cares? Who cares about these people that are in here? And I'm like, okay, now the bathroom is totally packed. There's 50 people in it. You can actually feel someone breathing on your neck. But you notice is you're just relaxed. Nothing comes up. So you're just relaxed. It's simple. That's very, very, very simple to do, right? It took probably 20 minutes, maybe. He gives me a call about a week later, goes, "Hey man, I went out and we were enjoying this thing. Yeah, I peed just fine." I was like, it's amazing what can happen. So I'm not actually trying to get him to imagine himself pee. I'm trying to get him to imagine himself relaxed. And so when you can take the visualization is just a trick of your brain to seem like you've already done it. Like the whole goal of that part is just to make your brain go, "Oh, we've done this before." It's not that, to normalize it. But once you have the feeling also, because we can think so many times, and that works a little bit. So if you just do a little bit of visualization, but the second that you add in the emotional component where you're talking about what the feeling is that you're experiencing, and you have that experience while your eyes are closed, it's private, everything's nice, your body doesn't know what else to do when you get in person. It has no clue but to do what you've already felt. And so to me, adding the two together, especially you add a little bit of the breath work, like you said, to really open them up, because you can't change unless you're relaxed. You can't change unless that front part of you is really fired up. Get the visualization and then add that feeling in together. I mean, I've had people quit smoking, smoke for 50 years, come in, little same kind of session like that, and bada boom, bada bing. They're like, "Dude, I've tried Chantix, I've tried Nicorette gum, which, a lot of these things too, talking about how great the body is. Chantix, the biggest side effect of Chantix is that you have suicidal and murderous rage. I mean, that's the number one side effect, is that you may feel like you may not smoke, but you may feel like killing your neighbor, so it's like, but our body has these things. It's got this beautiful mechanism of visualization. It's got the beautiful mechanism of breath work. And we have these states to be able to process things, to be able to make little bitty changes. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't have to go out and be like, "I want to be a totally different person tomorrow." It's not that. It's about making those little micro changes and then giving a little bit of time. Because if you feel confident enough to make changes where you've suffered for years and years and years, and then suddenly in a short period, you can make a change, the next time you come up against something that you want to change, you don't go, "Well, shit, that's never going to happen for me. That's just way too hard." You think, "Well, I can do that. We'll just breathe a little bit. We'll make a little visualization. It won't be that hard." And I think it's so empowering. What I like about breath work and guided meditation, things like that, is that you are empowering yourself. It's not, even though you may have a facilitator that helps you do that, someone who's really good at what they do and can hold that space for you, it's you're doing the change. I always tell the clients, it's not me. I'm just here to be a pretty face next to you. You're going to be doing all of the work. I'll guide you for a little bit, but if what I'm saying isn't exactly aligned with what's going on in your brain, run with what your brain's doing. Just run. It's whatever's coming up. That's what we need to face. I think it's so beautiful to be able to inspire people in such a way to start believing in themselves. And that's what I think, as any kind of facilitator, you've got to pull your head out of your ass and not think that it's all on you. Because so many people are like, "Well, who am I to help these people? And I don't know if I deserve this or not." People have problems. If you have the opportunity to step in and help somebody through something, or to help them achieve something more than they've ever thought that they could have, I mean, it's almost you have a duty now. I mean, it's like you have to pull yourself out of the equation and say, "I'm here to serve." I mean, why the hell else would I be here? I mean, we're down and doing it. Let's make something happen.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, when I think about visualization and meditation, I love that you called it an embodiment practice, because I always struggle when I hear people say, "Yeah, just meditate and visualize." And I'm thinking, but meditation is cessation of mind. It's no more thought. So when we visualize, we're actively thinking, we're actively trying to cultivate things in our body. And that's the opposite of what true meditation is. So my take on it is that you're right. It's an embodiment practice and not necessarily a meditation, where you're activating and programming consciously what you want your body and mind to respond to.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And, when we think about the things that really initiate change in our life, it's the quality of our thoughts, the quality of how we feel, and the quality of our action. And practices like breath work or visualization or hypnosis or anything really that all of us are here doing allows you to break into either thought, feeling, or action and create a shift that then further influences the thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so I think when you're able to distill it down to that, like, if I want to create change, I need to change likely my thoughts, my feelings, or my actions. Okay, perfect. And when I do, I'm going to influence and elevate the thoughts, feelings, and actions associated with whatever change that I've created. Like, it's simple. It's repetitive. Sometimes it's mundane. Sometimes things don't happen as quickly as you desire to, but if you're showing up and doing this work, it's not a matter of if the change that you desire to see is going to happen. It's simply a matter of when. And like, I just point back to the science on that. I'm like, you want to
Consistency.
change your mind, neuroplasticity just takes repetition. That's how habits are formed.
Yeah, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one other thing I'd like to bring up before we wrap up today's call is you talked about the importance of the prefrontal cortex, right? The other thing that closes that down is alcohol. And I really feel like that's an important message to share, because we think we're like numbing ourselves to, the feelings. Well, we know that's why we're doing it, but we have to feel the thing. We got to feel it to heal it. And I just wanted to make sure that anyone listening who's wanting to go into these practices is not negating all the work that they're doing by also drinking alcohol. So I'm throwing that out there.
Heavy. Yeah.
So I always like to end our chats with asking, what does living an elevated life mean to you?
I think this goes back to the conversation around, practicing what you preach. It's actually choosing to do this work and these practices because of the access it gives you into feeling good, the access it gives you into freedom and liberation, whether it's freedom of choice because you're more empowered to go out there and do the damn thing, do the things that you desire to do and create change in the ways that you desire to create change, freedom of time, freedom of emotion, freedom of energy and attachment. And for me, living an elevated life is like really just being in devotion to those things that are going to create freedom for me, and knowing that as I do, I will be supported beyond comprehension in every desire, every step that I take. And like this is the path. This is walking in integrity. This is practicing what you preach. This is choosing this not only for yourself, but like you were saying, because our service is bigger than us. It's actually not even about us.
Devotion to freedom.
Yeah. One thing else I want to point out too is that you have this like really beautiful, calm confidence. There's like a calmness about you, and I'm sure all the stuff that you do really helps with that. But there is, and I want to tell, it's like a lot of people want to do better in life. We're always trying to look for like what that edge is. And I think a lot of people think that they have to like push harder or run harder or faster or be something different. And a lot of times it's a calmness, especially if you want to be in the kind of industry that we're in, where we're helping people, because people are going to lay heavy shit on you. Even if you're helping just people with manifestation, everyone's got a story, everyone's got a problem, everyone's got trauma that they've overcome. And a lot of times they're going to trust you when you're calm to open up. And sometimes they've never told anybody some of the stuff that you're going to hear. And so it's so important to develop this calmness. And you're such a great example of what that calmness sounds and feels like, because the way that you're choosing your words and the way that we're having this conversation, you can tell. And that calmness for a lot of people builds confidence in the other person across the room or across the table or a Zoom or whatever from them. And I think it's really beautiful, especially as a female, to just have it's strong. It's a real power move. And I just want to say it's really beautiful to have been on this conversation with you and to sort of watch the way that you work and then watch the way that your mind works. I feel like a lot of people would really benefit from developing some of that calmness in their own lives.
Thank you. I received that. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. I grew up in very intense energy and very like my early 20s. And even as I first started my business, it was like very masculine driven energy, go, 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 push, 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 hustle, because I was running away from my past. And I realized that, after pushing so hard and like looking on paper and seeing like, wow, I did all the things that I said I was going to do and so much more, but being like so miserable and so like not connected to my life, I really had to reconcile, like, is that helpful for me to be in that energy? Is it helpful for me to keep pushing? Or do I need to bring a little bit more softness into how I hold myself, but also how I move in my life? And so I think that, it's a pendulum that swings back and forth between when do I push and when do I go and when do I lean back and let myself kind of just be move forward without feeling. I have a vision of like floating down a river right now and like a super cute little unicorn raft or something like that. Like
Love her so much.
when do I do that versus when do I like put my rollerblades on and move a little bit faster? And so I appreciate that so much, and thank you both for such a fun conversation. You also brought it out of me. So thank you.
Oh gosh, yeah. I was laughing because yes, she does exude this calm confidence, but as a psychic, I'm like, no, this bitch is wild as fuck. Like I can see her energy just like shining, like she's a go-getter. She's like, I can see all aspects of you, and it's beautiful to see how you've balanced the masculine and the feminine, because I relate to that so much. Coming from trauma and trailer park, I was independent, go-getter, make a lot of money, fucking hustle my ass off, and was just gonna punch down every door or person that got in my way. And now as a more feminine, relaxed, receptive, go with the flow on my magical unicorn ride, it is that beautiful balance of knowing when to say, okay, I'm ready, I'm here, it's showtime, but knowing before you hit burnout, it's time to sit back, relax, and receive. So I just love that you embody that so deeply. I do have a question. What are you curious about right now? Like, where's your head at? Where's your heart going? Like, what are you like on your like low key downtime? What are you getting yourself into?
So it's so funny that you asked that, because earlier today I was sitting with my one-on-one sessions that I offer. I work with a lot of like 6 and 7 figure business owners that are too much in their masculine and need a little bit more of this grace.
Yeah.
And I realized that a practice that I do a lot for myself very intuitively, but I've never been trained in, is EFT and tapping. And so that's something that I am going to start exploring more, because again, I do it intuitively. Like I was in the gym this morning. It was such a hard workout, and I just found myself there tapping on my chest, helping me move the emotion that I was feeling from working out, and like the just everything going through my mind. And so tapping is something that has been super interesting to me that I've never really explored. I don't know if it's something that I'm going to offer, but I would love to learn more about it to see like what's actually making me feel good, and like why is it working. And so I would say tapping, but also like even outside of business, just bringing more play into my life and really like giving myself the moments that I think oftentimes we distance ourselves from until we have hit whatever next milestone. Like, oh, I'll do this for myself when I get to this point, or I'll book that trip, or I'll do XYZ. And just kind of collapsing time around that and saying, now is the moment, right? Like the gifts are always in the present. So why not give myself what I desire and what I'm worthy of and what would feel good, and expand my energy and elevate my energy right now.
I love that. The present is the present.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I pulled a card for you from my Shine from the Inside Oracle deck, and I am so curious to see what comes up. Oh, this is perfect. Nourish your body with high vibing energy. So this is like the perfect reminder of just getting back into that daily, easy, basic practice. Move your ass, breathe some air, and drink some water. It really doesn't have to be hard. So I love that you fully embody bringing that high vibing energy. So freaking cool. So where can our elevators find more of your wisdom? How can they connect with you, babe?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you again. This conversation has been so much fun. I'm so happy that we were able to connect. You two are so passionate, so intelligent, such incredible conversationalists. And so I'm so grateful to have been a part of your podcast and get introduced to your community. My Instagram is at Ava Johanna, AvaJohanna. My company, the Academy of Breath. You can also follow us on Instagram at Academy of Breath. We offer personal like DIY courses where you can go through the breathwork techniques and meditation practices on your own if you're just starting to kind of get into it, or if you want to become a facilitator. We have a 12-week training, and then we also have a 6-month training that is more of an advanced practitioner training, launching next year. Our 4th round will be next year. So lots of ways to work with me and connect with me.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here, Ava. You are such a bright light, and it's been a pleasure getting to know more about you and hearing your unique approach and take on how to bring breath, which is keeping us alive, into a more holistic approach of actually being conscious and controlling it so that we can live more elevated life. It has been so incredible to hear all of your wisdom. And so thank you again for sharing it with our elevators.
Huge thanks.
So amazing.